thank you for the invitation to be here, to both the Genealogical Society and to the Historical Society. I'm really glad to be here and to be a part of it, and excited to kind of share the story and information about what's going on here in Warren County. So for what we're going to see today, I want the nature, the format of the talk will be going to give you a little bit of background. What does it mean to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site? And then talk about from that, what is it involved and what stage are we in terms of getting that happening here at Fort Ancient as well as other sites in Ohio. And then at the end of the talk, I want to talk a little bit more about some information that shares the artistry and the creativity of the people that were here over 2,000 years ago and some of the things that they made, and not only the things that they made, but the places that they brought the raw material from in order to make those objects. So that's kind of the format, but give you an overall idea. This is really a big deal. And I guess my first question before we get started, has anybody here been to a UNESCO World Heritage Site? You got two people, one person there? Okay. So when we talk about UNESCO World Heritage Sites, we're talking about places like Stonehenge, or the Taj Mahal, or Machu Picchu, or in the United States, the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Smoky Mountains. Have anybody been to the Smoky Mountains? Well, you've been to a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Or Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave is all. So hopefully today you'll find out that, hey, when I go to my next cocktail party, I can tell everybody how many UNESCO World Heritage Sites I've been to. Okay? All right. So I'm here as a representative from the Ohio History Connection, which formerly was the Ohio Historical Society. And they're responsible for quite a few of the historical sites that we find here in Ohio. And they've been the one to spearhead this effort to sponsor the recognition of the Hopewell Earthworks that are present in Ohio to get that recognition for UNESCO. If there are questions you have, don't wait till the end. Raise your hand. We make this kind of conversational and don't feel like you have to, I don't want to interrupt him, but if you have questions about something, please let me know and we'll stop and I'll do the best I can. Or I'll defer to my wife because she'll probably give you a better answer then. Sorry, Becky. All right, so World Heritage. And so what does UNESCO stand for? Because you see that a lot. What's actually the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And And part of that organization very much is focused on identifying and supporting cultural, historical, or scientific forms that are present in the world that have really significant sites. And they're judged to be this cultural or natural heritage. So what we're talking about with the Ohio nomination ties more to cultural heritage and the earthworks and the things that they developed and they built here in Ohio. So that's going to be the designation of that, as compared to saying, well, it's not a Grand Canyon or it's not Mammoth Cave. It is something that was built by human beings, and that's why the distinction with that. And then, UNESCO has been started, and was started in 1972. It's connected with the United Nations, and and there's been, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but there's probably over, I think, 1,154 World Heritage Sites in the world today. But in the United States, how many do you think there are? Any idea? 24. Okay. And so it is a very important thing that when you get that World Heritage Site status, it has global significance. So it's not just a local thing, it's global. And so it also, if you get that, you'll be able to get international funding and assistance to preserve these treasures. And it brings prestige, it brings public awareness. The other thing we need to understand, it will bring tourist revenue here. And what's interesting is that the type of people that very much go and look for World Heritage Sites are very much international visitors. So it's going to change a little bit of the nature if we get this status and it happens here in terms of the clientele and the people that will be buying things, they will be eating here, they will be visiting. and they will want to see, well, what else do you have around here other than just Fort Ancient? And so that's a very good thing from a business standpoint and the commercial aspects here for Warren County. So again, I mentioned there's just a couple of examples. You know, I mentioned Machu Picchu, the Giza pyramids in Egypt, the Taj Mahal, other places, and it's like they really are places on Earth that are outstanding in terms of its universal value and should therefore be part of the common heritage of all humankind, not just of that nation or not just of that country. And so then examples that I mentioned there in the United States, one I highlight that's more of a natural site that would be Grand Canyon, but there are two cultural sites that are due to the earthworks that were built in the United States, one in Louisiana called Poverty Point, and also in eastern Illinois, or in western Illinois, east of St. Louis, called Cahokia. Earthworks that were built there and recognized. And then the last one, just as an example, is the San Antonio missions that are there in southern, or down in San Antonio. And it's not just one mission, it's I think 7 or 8 missions that are all together, but it's included overall as one site. And so this is a map to show you the distribution of those World Heritage Sites worldwide. And when you look at it, there's 3 different colors, yellow, green, and red. The green corresponds to that are natural sites that have that kind of significance, so like Mammoth Cave in Grand Canyon or Yosemite would have that. Yellow sites are one that are tied to cultural issues. And then the red ones, what would you think the red ones correspond to? Any idea? These are endangered sites. And how are they going to be endangered? Well, they're endangered by warfare, they're endangered by environment in terms of, and people talking about whether climate change is going to have an impact, or whether something can be preserved or not. And there's all kinds of other issues that go into, one, to get the site status, but then also to maintain it. Because if you get site status, you are required every year to do an assessment and make sure, are you maintaining it according to UNESCO standards that you have in terms of your site. So that gives you an idea of, and where do you think the biggest concentration? Yes, ma'am, go right ahead.
For the United States, do we have any red?
No, that's in Mexico, yeah. No, we don't.
Thank you.
No, good question, though. So, very high concentration in Europe, okay? So in terms of, and a lot of it is yellow, so a lot of it ties into cultural heritage in terms of the histories that are there. Not to say that there aren't beautiful native or natural sites that are there that are also World Heritage, but that just shows you the overall distribution. And then if you look at this gives you a breakdown of which countries have World Heritage Sites. And the country with the most is Italy. And then it goes to China, Germany, France, Spain, and on down the list. And the United States is there at 24. So Italy has 58. And so this is just kind of a list that gives you overall distribution of where are World Heritage Sites that we know of today. And for, just so you know, Ohio is not listed as any one of those sites for anything that's found in the United States. We hope that changes. Yes?
On the previous slide, are those green things in the ocean, or are they on islands?
There are both.
Oh.
There are places like the Great Barrier Reef is also a site. So they don't limit, they try to be very inclusive and consider all those things that are a unique natural thing that needs to be preserved. So, things that are marine refuges and things like that, or islands, yeah, absolutely. Those also can be considered for World Heritage Site status. Okay, good question though. Now this is just a map to show you where they're located in the United States, both in the lower 48, also in Hawaii and Alaska, and also in San Juan. But you get an idea of the distribution of where all those sites are, and might think about, oh yeah, I visited that place. And just to give you an idea so you can run through that list, and if you want to write this down, then I've got a list of here are all the sites in the United States that are World Heritage Sites. Okay? And this started in 1972 and is including going up to today. And what's interesting is, just for a difference, is there's also a thing that there's a documentation of Frank Lloyd Wright architecture. So one of the sites that is considered from a cultural standpoint are examples of his architecture. So it's not just one home or one building, but it's a collection of those that are scattered in different places in the United States, but it's still considered one World Heritage Site under one umbrella of Frank Lloyd Wright. But that gives you an overall distribution. There's a lot of national parks, but it just gives you an idea of the diversity of things that are there, what are considered. So this is an impressive list of places that we find as American citizens, these are important and valuable to us, and we hope that we can add some of the Ohio earthworks to that list too. So we're going to go in and talk about, well, what are we trying to do here in Ohio? And just to give you an idea, this started to get the nomination for World Heritage started in 2008. And there's a process you go through to get to the stage where we are today. Part of it is just to be included in something called a tentative list. So the tentative list started for examples from the earthworks that were here in Ohio, and there's several others that were there. And then when you go through that list, they look at it and decide, is that something worth following up? And so there's been series of stage gates that individuals, or the Ohio History Connection, the National Park Service, even the State Department and the Department of Interior have been involved in terms of this overall process for that selection to happen. So the places that we're talking about that have been nominated are here on the map. And just to give you an idea that, and some of these are what I call computer model generations of what the site looks like. Some are actual, the site itself. But this would be a site description looking at Fort Ancient. If you stripped off all the trees and what they thought the design looked like early on. This would be the Newark Octagon and Great Circle site up in Licking County. This is the Mound City group that is over there in Chillicothe, and it's a part of the national park that's there in Chillicothe. And then there's also, this is Site Mound, which is also a part of which is located right here. And those are all associated with the Scioto and the Paint Creek River Valley, where you find us. Yes?
Did anybody ever LiDAR these sites to ensure that you got all the...
I'll pay you later. Just hold on. I've got to... Oh, if you were a girl, I'd give you a kiss right now. So, okay. But I'll show you a picture of... Well, let's just segue. I'll go into that. The other story I wanted to tell you is why Ohio? Why earthworks? Why is it such a big deal? And this is a map that was done in 1914 by W.C. Mills, and they captured the documentation of all the mounds and earthen structures that people knew or existed in the state of Ohio, almost over 10,000 of them. But do you know how they documented and captured all these things? Anybody have an idea? How would you go about doing that?
Just ask people.
They asked people, but you know what else they did? They used the U.S. Postal Service. So they sent a request to all the postmasters in the state of Ohio and said, for all your letter carriers that are out delivering mail, if you see and are aware of an earth mound or an earthwork or a burial mound, please use this postcard. Write down the information, the address, and what it looks like. And if you want to sketch it, that would be great. And send it back to Mr. W.C. Mills in Columbus, Ohio, because they're trying to collect that. So they gathered all that information from the U.S. Postal Service and didn't have to pay I guess they probably got the free franking privilege for mailing from if you were a Postal Service employee sending it back. But that's how they collected all this. And then from that, then they went back and ground truth and checked that those locations were actually there. And they used that and be able to put this map together. Now, some archaeologists were thrilled that they did that. Some people were very upset with that. Why would you think that archaeologists or scientists would be upset that there would be a map of those sites given to the public? Any
Everybody
idea?
under the sun would go and try and dig it.
Absolutely. They were worried about vandalism. They were worried about people to come in and dig in there and try to find artifacts and go sell it. In fact, it's present today. There's, you talk to people and, how much information do you really want to give out? And things that, if it's not protected, you're a little concerned about that. But that's how it happened. But it really does show you that primarily Southern Ohio had a lot of sites that were there along the river valley systems. Why would they have earthworks that would be associated near the river valleys? Water. And what was water used for? Transportation. So at that time, 2,000 years ago, those rivers and creeks were areas for them to navigate and to move around, and that's where we find those sites today. And so when we talk about Hopewell, what do we mean by that? There's no evidence in any of the excavations or the archaeological work that says, oh, we were called the Hopewell people. Actually, Hopewell is the name of the farm, of the family name that owned the farm where they did the excavation and some of the mounds that's outside of Chillicothe. And Warren King Moorhead, and I'll talk a little bit about him, was instrumental in doing those early earthworks and then gave that designation, and it just stuck in terms of continuing on as a naming of the type of artifact and also the type of people and the time frame that they lived and they existed in Ohio. So this just shows you an example of the types of things that were built. This is called the High Banks Earthworks, and this is a rendering that you see today. What you have, part of it is because of agricultural practices and development and building, things that were major earthworks that were identified back in the 1800s up to 1840s, or you don't see them anymore. They've been plowed over, but they've been doing geophysical work to be able to identify those actually are the outlines of what have been present there. And then they use what I call like prescriptive mowing to say the different types of grasses to correspond to what those outlines. So if you go visit that, you'll be able to get an idea of the sense of what it looked like. But it's actually due to how they cut the grass, but it's a manifestation of what's there. And then also, you see here in Newark, that's still one of the preserved earthwork walls that's present, that is preserved. So there are places where that is present. And that's one of the really great things about Fort Ancient. Fort Ancient is the best example of a preserved earthwork that has not been restored of any of the ones that's in Ohio. So it's pristine from that standpoint. And so when UNESCO then will look and do their evaluation on site sometime by the end of this year, then that's a big selling point that the Ohio History Connection is pushing for. Now, LIDAR. And your name is? AJ, thank you, AJ. So, here's a LIDAR picture of Fort Ancient. So here's a computer model showing what they think it might have looked at. This is what it looks like today. And what's interesting, what is LIDAR? LIDAR is called Laser Imaging Detection and Ranging. It's a high resolution mapping technique that's airborne. And then they'd be able to, in terms of the mapping, be able to strip away or see through vegetation and be able to actually get a very detailed view of what the topography of the land looks like. What this has really made a huge difference in terms of archaeology is in Central America and looking for Aztec and Mayan ruins, be able to look through the jungle cover that's there. And there's been major discoveries of using LIDAR data in that area of places that they would never go to. But this just shows you an idea and gives you a detail of, well, they built Fort Ancient. It's kind of on top of a plateau looking down into the Little Miami River Valley. And that's exactly so this is the Little Miami River running right through here. And so Camp Kern would be over here, and the Jeremiah Morrow Bridge would be running somewhere right through there. But that gives you an idea of, that you had an earthwork that was actually built on a hilltop, not on a hillside or on a terrace. Oh, then one other thing I was going to talk about is Warren King Moorhead. So Warren King Moorhead is one of my heroes, And he's a member of the King family from Kings Mills. He didn't grow up in Kings Mills. Actually, he was born in Italy. But he was part of the King family. But he didn't go into the King Powder Company business. He decided, he went to Denison University, got interested in anthropology, and came back and was going and doing work in archaeology and getting involved in some of the things that are going on in Ohio. Well, the King family wasn't very happy with that. He's getting his hands dirty by digging around in the dirt and probably selling those things, and why he should come back and be with us. But Warren King stuck to his guns and stayed with it, and he ended up becoming the first state archaeologist for the state of Ohio. It was instrumental in the work he did and the designation of the work in Fort Ancient, was able to get the Ohio legislature to budget the money, and they funded and purchased the Fort Ancient acreage and established the first state park in Ohio was at Fort Ancient. Just so you know that, okay? And so Warren, good guy that he did, he made that happen. So I'm always, and plus he's kind of linked to Kings Mills, so I'm kind of, I'll throw that out there too. But so the criteria for World Heritage is that it's a masterpiece of human creative genius. It's unique or it's exceptional testimony to cultural tradition or civilization which is a living or has disappeared. The other thing they did in terms of creative genius was the design, and this is kind of into things I would talk about: architecture, astronomy, engineering, design, construction, and the type of sites that they built. So this is an example of the octagon and the great circle in Newark. And when it lines up, every 18.6 years lines with the northernmost rise of the moon, and that's where those things line up. So every one of the other points that you have on that overall design had lunar significance in terms of the timing of that. So, and I always thought about, well, that is amazing that they did that, but well, at nighttime, what else did you have to look at if you were 2,000 years ago? It was, I say that in jest, and I know you're going to have that on TV, and somebody will say, oh gosh, I can't believe he said that. But part of it is, they very much were aware of their environment and their surroundings, both in the earth, sky, and water. Okay? That was critical and that was crucial to them, and they wanted to understand that, and that was also part of their worship experience as well. So, and when they would design the earthworks to reflect that, then they made those designs to correspond to those timing of events that happen. They also did it that would, in terms of, this is from the Mound City group, how they aligned up with local landforms that were there. So Mount Logan and other areas that were just east of Chillicothe along the Scioto River, those things were tied up, and those earthworks were tied to that landscape as well. And then they also just had very geometrically precise designs that they came up with. And one of the things that was interesting is that either the circles and the diameter of the circles or the sides of the squares end up being 1,054 feet. And it was consistent, not only just here, but in other sites that they had and that they built in Ohio. So there was not only a design, it was a design that was consistent, and that was translated and used as a building design in other parts of Ohio as well. So I just want to just highlight those things in terms of whether those great circles. Now to segue into the other part I would talk about is their artistry and their cultural tradition and the things that they created. So here you're seeing artifacts that have been excavated and found in the earthwork sites that we have that are up for nomination. Whether it's things that are made from sheets of mica that came from North Carolina, whether you had an obsidian spear that came from Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, found in Ohio, okay? Whether you had a clay mask that was designed, whether you had a comb or another design that was made from turtle shell, another piece of mica, or also pipestone and steatite of things that they carved. So it's amazing the artistry and the things that they worked on and they brought and that we were able to find that these people were truly incredible artists. And they also, one of the things we found is in terms of the architecture, and you see all those circles and, and how precise they were. One of the things they also find around here, and in more than one place in Warren County, are the post holes. Think about, does anybody know if I said, could you describe Stonehenge to me? How would you describe Stonehenge? What does Stonehenge look like to you? A circle of standing up rocks. Well, there also had things that we found I haven't done that, but archaeologists have found that there are circles of wood hole posts that are found in not only at Fort Ancient, but also at the Stubbs earthwork sites at Little Miami, where Little Miami High School is. There's also places down in Milford and also down in Newtown and all along the Little Miami River Valley. But they were specific designs in terms of post holes, and they go, well, they just didn't have wood, posts sticking up out of the ground. There was probably coverings to that, and thinking about that was a place of gathering. And you're able to see that when they do their excavations. You find something that definitely looks like it's round and circular and has a different color scheme, and then you get a pattern and they can use that as their model to, as they do their excavations going forward. So I talked about, in terms of the types of artifacts that came to Ohio and things that we found. Where all did they come from? So I showed you pictures of what the artifacts look like, but where did the material come from? And so the thing I'm going to talk about a little bit more is that we had material from the Upper Peninsula, the copper from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We had flint from North Dakota. We also had flint and obsidian from Wyoming at Yellowstone National Park, grizzly bear teeth from the Rocky Mountains. We had galena from the Ozarks. We also had quartz crystals from Arkansas, and we had shells from the Gulf of Mexico, shark teeth from the Chesapeake Bay, silver from Canada. So all this stuff was found and brought in, and then material, that was the raw material that was there. Now you think, oh, well, that's probably an indication of what? Trade. So what happens with trade? What would you expect back at Yellowstone if they traded with Ohio? Buckeyes. That's true. They probably melted by then, but I don't. That's the point, is that there's not been a whole lot of evidence of significant material that you could say is from Ohio that is found in these other locations. So some people say, well, maybe they traded consumable goods. As a possibility that they took that back with them, or really, when I talked to Brad Lepper, who's one of the top archaeologists in Ohio, and he's one of the executive leaders at Ohio History Connection. He looks at this and says he feels like that southern Ohio and the earthworks area was an area of pilgrimage. And people knew about the earthworks that were here, and they brought things with them to either worship, to celebrate, or to bury significant people that were buried here in Ohio. So it was something that was very, very special. And these are, think about these artifacts, how utilitarian were they? Not really. They were more artistic and decorative, and things of beauty, not necessarily things of a tool, but they also built tools too. So don't want to make a bad point about that, but that's kind of the thought that this place was a very, very special place to the Native Americans 2,000 years ago. And we're able to document that significance as it goes forward. So when they think about it, trying to give the overall view to UNESCO to tell them, well, we really think these earthworks connect people, the earth, and the cosmos across space and time. What are the cultural and economic benefits of having something like that in Warren County? You build a local and regional relevance. So it's not just Fort Ancient, and it's not just Newark Earthworks. It's a collection of all of them. So this is a regional approach to UNESCO about the sites. So it links counties and cities together that normally might not even think that they're brother and sister, in terms of that, but they are connected in terms of they're all part of earthwork sites that were built by these people at the same time, and they are connected. So the way that this story is going forward, when they talk about it, it's the Ohio Hopewell Earthworks, the celebration of that, and it's a collection of them. Now, one question nobody has brought up yet, and I'll bring it up now, is what about Serpent Mound? Well, it's under consideration for future inclusion, but the historians and the archaeologists look at and say that the timing and when Serpent Mound was built in Adams County is completely different than the time that when the Hopewell earthworks were made. So to keep it clean and pure in terms of the denomination to UNESCO and the experts in there, they've made it such that we're going to keep it separate. But also, Serpent Mound is a world-class effigy site that's present, and it's right here in our own backyard. So I think that later on, if we get this through, that could be added later, as an additional attraction that we're there. So it's a regional approach to doing this site selection. And so where are we in the process? The nomination's been submitted to UNESCO, and it was done, and it officially had to be done by the State Department, but it was coordinated by the Department of Interior, the National Park Service, and the Ohio History Connection. And Michael has seen this, but the nomination was like a 300-page dossier that was submitted to UNESCO, and it covers all aspects in terms of whether it's archaeological, whether it's economic, whether it's cultural, all kinds of things that it's a very impressive piece of work in order to get to that designation that, hey, we've done our homework, this does make sense. And so that's being evaluated by the experts primarily in Europe that are looking at the material, and that's going to be going on for probably the better part of this year and maybe even into next year. Things have kind of slowed down because of the pandemic in terms of actual following up and meeting deadlines. We have a conflict going on in Eastern Europe today that's kind of a little scary, but there's things that are happening that's there. There's also a follow-up that'll be an on-site review. So sometime before the end of the year, there'll be people that have been designated experts, archaeological experts around the world that will come to Warren County and that will visit Fort Ancient, and they will look at the document, kind of ground truth. Okay, you said this is here. I want to see it for myself. And not only are they going to look at it, what do you have? What are your plans for the future? What's that visitor experience going to be like? Are you going to be able to accommodate all these potential visitors that are going to be traveling through your county to come out there and handle that? So those are the part of the questions that's going on, and that on-site should be done, hopefully by the end of the year. And then there's issues that they're dealing with, and one, there's been a very much a huge increase in terms of focus of dealing with the tribal nations. And one of the connections that's happened today is specifically with the Eastern Shawnee tribe that's in Oklahoma, and Chief Glenna Wallace has visited Ohio, visited Fort Ancient, and visited all the sites, and has been extremely supportive and helpful in terms of putting the story together from an indigenous people's perspective. It wasn't that the Shawnee tribe built this. The Shawnee tribe traveled through that and saw that and appreciated it, and they appreciate it too. But there's a lot of effort to understand if they see an artifact, we might look at it and say, oh, well, they probably did this with it, but then have a whole different perspective from a Native American perspective and looking at what that artifact is. There's also an issue dealing with the Octagon Earthworks in Newark. There's an ongoing legal issue in terms of a lease agreement that's there, and that's in front of the Ohio Supreme Court, and was submitted to them in April, I think, of 2021, and we're still waiting on a rendering on what that decision is going to be, but it has to do with the lease agreement of a golf course that's on on the Newark Earthworks site. And so there's this, again, plans for this visitor experience, and then, are you really preparing these sites to welcome the visitors? And so those are all things that have to happen that we're working on in the background, but it's that on-site evaluation, the evaluation by UNESCO, and then we'll get a rendering, and then it'll go to a board of the UNESCO that will then do a vote and decide whether it's a thumbs up or thumbs down if that's actually going to happen. Yes?
It'd be a thumbs up for your review of the 5, or does that have to be all 5?
I think the recommendation is for all of them. But you're right, if something should happen, if one doesn't, if they say, oh, you can't do that, if that's there, the position of Ohio History Connection and others is that we're going forward with the recommendation no matter what for the whole thing. Okay? So how can you get involved? And so part of it is, there's a thing that we have that's been established called the Friend of the World Heritage of Ohio, and there's a website that you can click on to get all that information for that. You can, there's like everything else that we do in trying to preserve and hold on to historical things, it doesn't come cheap. It's not, you need funds. So there's ways in terms of if you feel so inclined to contribute to that. There's a website in terms of doing that, but also doing volunteering, which is one of the things that I've done since retirement is going to do volunteer work at Fort Ancient. And it's kind of switching from being a geologist. My wife's a genealogist, and trying to work and understand archaeology, which has been a great experience for me. And then also just to be able to spread the word of, this is really an exciting thing, folks. I can't overemphasize this, that to get World Heritage Site status to a site is unbelievable. And it's something that if we can get that and have that happen here in Ohio, that's truly a gem or a feather or whatever you want to say that's in our cap to recognize that significance. So the opportunity's here, and I just keep watching in terms of hopefully we'll hear in more information by the end of the year, but it's getting close. So we started in 2008, it's 2022. Man alive, that took a long time. It does take time, and you think about all the coordination that's going between government entities to make decisions about things, and not only government, but international government agencies. It's huge. So I wanted to kind of touch base on a few things. I talked about the artifacts, and I mentioned about the masterpiece of human creative genius and this unique, exceptional testimony to the cultural tradition or civilization, which is living or has been disappeared. What I'm going to show you is, here's a list that I put together when I did my project work for Fort Ancient. I said, you got all these artifacts, where did they come from? And this is just a small list, there's others, but it gives you an idea of the material that's been brought to Ohio and artifacts were made from them. And primarily they were either minerals, they were rocks, or they were biological or fossil material. And what I'm going to highlight today are just 3 examples of one of each of those. So from copper, from obsidian, which is an igneous rock, and freshwater pearls, what are some of the artifacts that we have found in Ohio that they use that material? So first of all, I'm going to start with copper. And primarily, we're pretty sure that a lot of it, not all of it, came from Lake Superior, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. But these are just some other examples of things material that was brought in Ohio and and just an example is that they've also found meteoric iron. You know what that is? Iron from meteorites. They can document, they've done scientific evaluation of the iron that they made ear spools with and found in an excavation in Ohio was made from iron from a meteorite that they found in Kansas. Does that blow your mind? I was going to say it's out of this world, but then it's amazing. So Becky, they did laugh at one of my jokes, so I just thought, okay. So native copper. And this just shows examples of what raw samples of what native copper is. What's interesting for the copper they found in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, it's almost like 98% pure. So it doesn't need, in terms of work to heat it up or to clean it up or whatever. It was actually, they could dig it up and use it, cold hammer it, and use it right there. So this just gives you an example of what that native copper might look like. And this is a geologic map of the United States. So being a geologist, I had to show a geologic map. And all the colors that you see in terms of the the maps are the places in Ohio, or not in Ohio, in the United States, are all just different ages of rock formations that are found. But what I don't know if I can point it out to you, but up here is these little locations that we know we've been able to find where there have been the copper mines that have been excavated, and that copper was then found in Ohio. There's also some places down in the southern Appalachians in eastern Tennessee and northern Georgia and part of that area, as well as some other areas up near in the eastern seaboard. But most of the copper that came was from this upper peninsula there okay. This kind of gives you an idea of what the mines, what they look like in terms of, the copper was found in like fracture patterns, and they maybe be 6 inches wide or it could be a foot wide and would go for hundreds of feet. And it was at the surface. And so they just dug it out from the surface to a certain point that made sense, and then they would go on and do that. But what's interesting is that I just wanted to show this slide to you. Is when I said about a fracture pattern, this is an outcrop on Isle Royal in the middle of Lake Superior. So 15 miles out in Lake Superior. This is volcanic rock on either side of it. This is a fracture that has now been filled with copper. And it just shows you what they encountered when they were looking for this copper. And so think about it, 2,000 years ago, if you saw this bright, shiny stuff in the ground, how do you explain that? Think of the stories that people told the individuals when they came back to Ohio of the material that they found, and this is how they found it. Okay? And what's interesting is that not only did they have that to deal with, but at nighttime they had this to deal with. So when I talk about earth, sky, and water, so to go on either a quest yourself to go bring that material back and back to your family or to your tribe of what you've done, they were able to experience the aurora borealis. You experience, think about it, open water on Lake Superior to go 15 miles in a dugout canoe or a raft, and then to find this special material that's there that was in the ground in a straight line, and then to dig it up and then bring it back and then go all the way back down to Ohio and say, here you go do your magic with it. But that's what happened is it was just a very, I just say it was a experience that in terms of this gave that material special meaning of the effort they had to go through in order to bring it back, okay? So this is just copper. But what did they make with this stuff? And these are just examples of things that have been found in the excavations in Ohio, primarily around the Chillicothe area, but also some in Fort Ancient too, in terms of the overall designs of these things are extremely intricate. Part of it are effigies. Some of them they think might be celestial views. There was jewelry that were made, either necklaces or anklets or bracelets that were found. And this is when you see copper that it's kind of, when it gets, not eroded, but tarnished or corroded, it doesn't look like that. But imagine what that stuff looked like when they made it originally in terms of that was something of extreme value to them. Then they also made headdresses made of copper. All right? And so the things that have been found, like in the excavation, to see it's all flattened out, but then when you restore that, this is kind of an artist's rendition of what they felt, what those headdresses might have looked like. So the next thing is, I talked about minerals, so copper was the one. Now I'm going to talk about rocks. And the specific rock I'm going to talk about is obsidian, which is an igneous rock. And this is material that was brought from Wyoming at Yellowstone National Park and found here in Ohio in the excavations. In fact, one of the was excavated, they found close to over 600 pounds of obsidian as raw material that was there. So you think about, well, how did they do that? How many people actually, how many trips did it take to bring all that back? So, obsidian. This just gives you an idea of what does it look like. So obsidian in terms of, they call this a conchoidal fracture or a curved fracture when it breaks. And the edges of it is extremely sharp. Actually, obsidian is used even in surgical procedures today in terms of instruments because of how sharp it is. But it's not very durable. So it's not like you can just use it over and over again because it's so sharp it will break off. So it's used more for ceremonial purposes. And you can get an idea of the size of the spear points that were made. And those, most people would feel like were very ceremonial, not necessarily, a utilitarian thing that they used to go kill a mastodon or a woolly mammoth or something with it. It was something to use as part of the celebration. This is a map of Yellowstone. And so this is a border of Wyoming. And this overall area that you see here at Yellowstone at the park primarily covers the areas that was very volcanically active about anywhere from 700,000 to a little bit over a million, 1.2 million years ago. And because of that, it deposited this volcanic glass, which is what obsidian is. So what does it look like? This is the outcrops, and it's called Obsidian Cliffs at the national park. And people who have done the analysis on the artifacts in Ohio of obsidian can trace it to those outcrops. So from a provenance standpoint, to say, where did that material come from? And you can go to there. That's exactly what that place, which is very, as a geologist, I was very impressed that they could do that. That's pretty cool. And then it just shows you examples of what it looks like, whether it's weathered as a hand specimen or whether it looks as a fresh surface of what does obsidian look like. And then also recently at Yellowstone, there have been wildfires and that they've been, finally getting some of those things under control. But sometimes good things happen with wildfires, even in national parks. And in this area, because of the fires that happen in areas near Obsidian Cliffs, they've actually found mines and mining activity of the Native Americans that mined that obsidian, and they were able to find it just because of the wildfires that opened that up. It just gives you another example of the type of the artifacts that were found, the quality of that, the art. It's just amazing, and it just gives you an idea of the artistry and things that they worked and put those things together. And one other thing I was going to show you, and this is not a Hopewell headdress, no. But those wonderful ladies are giving you, they're there for scale to show you the size of look at the size of that spear point that they found. It's amazing. So just gives you an idea that was something very valuable and they used in their celebrations. So the last thing we're going to talk about are something that's biologic or fossil, and this is going to be pearls. So the other things that kind of tie into that, whether they're grizzly bear teeth, ivory, and the ivory that's been carved has been from mammoth or mastodon tusk. Okay, think about that. Not elephants that are from Africa, but this is from our own backyard. Pearls, shark teeth, and the shells. And so when we look at it, freshwater pearls shows you a difference between a cultured pearl and a natural pearl, just to give you an idea of what the difference looks like. And so where do they come from? Come from the mussels, that place which is like a bivalve. And the main one that's found in this part of the United States is called the Unio. And inhabits all the freshwater rivers and streams and ponds that are nearby. And this just shows you a map of that distribution of that mollusk that's here in the United States. So it's primarily the Midwest, all the way down to the south into Texas and into Florida. So I always said that there's plenty of mussels down in Texas, so that wasn't a very good joke. So, okay. Yes, Michael, go ahead.
Are you aware that the largest freshwater pearl found was in a collection from Warren County that was given to the Smithsonian, exhibited in France, in Paris, in 1893, and the largest freshwater pearl is now in St. Edward's crown of the British monarchy.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and I've got the paperwork on it, but that's exactly what happened. And it was the man who had the pearl button factory in Waynesville, Ohio, who made pearl buttons. And there are shoals near Waynesville where you could literally, if you dig down far enough, there will be the shells where they've been hollowed out. With the
Michael, just hold it right there. You're talking about one of my heroes.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Israel Hopkins Harris is the individual that Michael's talking about. And the other part of it is he was known to be potentially the first Yale graduate from Warren County. And he was a businessman, a banker, a philanthropist. I called him a gentleman geologist. But he's also an entrepreneur in terms of hiring young kids to go out in the Little Miami River Valley and to collect the mussels and the pearls from those. And what was interesting is Little Miami River was an ideal spot for the development of freshwater pearls. One, because the water was so clean back at that time. And the second is because the water was so hard. Because there's so much lime, because of the limestone that's part of the bedrock around this area, it just naturally helped to create those beautiful, very large freshwater pearls. So Israel Hopkins Harris is one of my heroes, and not only he also made those donations, and he was recognized in that work. But he also sold things to Tiffany's and made money from selling his freshwater pearls to Tiffany, right out of Waynesville, Ohio. Think about it. And what's interesting is that there's still some of the pearls at the Waynesville Historical Society, the building they have up there. I went and visited, and they have a jar of some of the freshwater pearls that his company had collected, and they also have the buttons that you mentioned about earlier. But it just gives you an idea of the shape and size and what did they look like, and I think that we're tied to Tiffany's. That's pretty cool. And then this gives you an idea of. I'm sorry. Yes.
So the pearls would have been something they could have traded back to another area.
Absolutely. But there was such a wide distribution of where the mussels were. Would it be unique only to Ohio that you found pearls? Probably not. But they were instrumental in terms of the type of necklaces and designs. And you think about, those things are pretty small. How did they drill the holes in there? And that's the other part of it I was just going to show you, is that this is a picture of freshwater pearls with scale. So you get an idea of, they came in all different varieties and sizes, but you can see how they spent, whoever was the person assigned to be meticulous and to hold on to those things and make sure you got the hole straight. But that was present in the excavations that they found in the mounds in Ohio. And they also would take and put inlaid pearls into the copper breastplates that they made. And so that was also another unique thing that they found. And this just gives you, like I said, the artist's rendition of what they think it might have looked like and what they wore, what it meant. So not only the big ear spools that are present that were made from silver from Canada, copper from the Upper Peninsula, and then pearls from all around different parts of Ohio. So I've been doing this for a couple years of doing volunteer work at Fort Ancient. I transitioned from being a geologist looking for oil and gas, and then saying, I want to do something different, and I want to apply my knowledge to something that's history, but more of Earth history tied to people. And then it's been an interesting effort to understand the Native Americans and the roles and the things that they were accomplished at and what they were good at, and able to provide the things that were either in order to live, order to travel, order to celebrate, order to build these things. Every one of these things they were good at. And it's not, I think some people think of, they were just mound builders or they were just savages. No, these are extremely educated, intelligent, and creative people that were here. And they were in our own backyard here 2,000 years ago. So one of the things to follow up and to kind of wrap this up, Warren County. So whether you're here from Warren County, I hope you are. If you're not, but I'm just going to focus on Warren County. You got to think about, you got world-class archaeology with Fort Ancient in your backyard. You've got world-class geology. Some of the best Ordovician fossils in the world are found in your backyard or in all around here. And not only that, but there's also Pleistocene, there's glacial features around here. If you go out 123 and there's the Rock Schoolhouse, one of the largest glacial boulders in the state of Ohio is in the backyard. And it's from Canada. and it came on a glacier down here, okay? We also have a world-class scenic river, the Little Miami River, and we're finally being better stewards of that and appreciating that in great ways. And then also just a hats off to all you folks here that we have a world-class historical focus in this county, both at this plot with this historical society and this museum and museums that are there, as well as a genealogical society that helps to document the people history of what we had here. So, and then finally, it's just, I look at it as that we got world-class people, and it's people like you. And I just want to thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the time. Thank you for your questions. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something today. Okay?